podcasting is 70% marketing. You can have the best content in the world, but if you get buried because you're not playing along with the algorithms the right way or whatever, you really need to get somebody who's good at marketing. You have to put marketing before you start your podcast.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
Hey, podcast rich host Adam Adams, and I'm joined with Ph.D. and I think attorney Elizabeth Gearhart.
I'm not an attorney.
Your husband's the attorney.
I'm a patent agent, though, so
Okay.
I can do patent work, but he's the patent attorney.
Cool. That's one thing that I have been extremely interested in ever since I think the year was 1997, or no, it was 2007. I read the book 10 years after the book came out, and Robert Kiyosaki in Rich Dad Poor Dad talks a lot about patent law and copyright law. And I've always thought it was so fascinating how much money some of these things can cost to get patented and how much money it can make you by owning some of that. So I think that's super, super interesting. Now, Elizabeth has 3 different podcasts, one far different from the other 2, I think. No, they're all completely different. One is about ghosts, one is about cats, and the other one that we'll probably talk a lot about because they've done tons of episodes through their podcast on it. It's called Passage to Profit. And they're publishing one a week, but also with a whole bunch of bonus episodes. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So Elizabeth, that's where I want to take my first question is to the publishing of Passage to Profit, and want to talk about the philosophy behind the bonus episodes, how they come out, what they're about, and if you plan to continue doing it.
So that is a great question. I'll give you a little bit of history about how Passage to Profit started. My husband is a patent attorney, as we just said, and we were approached by somebody we had met through networking from iHeart in New York, and she wanted us to start a radio show at iHeart, and it was paid advertising, I'll be honest. We didn't have any media reputation at that point. So we decided to start the radio show at iHeart. When we went to iHeart, we recorded there, and it was white glove treatment. They did everything. We had to do our own social media and promotion afterwards, but we went into a studio, we recorded, we had a professional producer, and that is the main podcast that is still happening today. Now, during COVID, we did it on Zoom, and we still sent it into our iHeart producer, and he produced it and made it sound good enough for the radio. I think people's standards lowered a little bit during that period, but we still go into the studio in Midtown Manhattan every couple of weeks, sometimes once a week. Just depends on who our guests are and where they are. Sometimes we still do it on Zoom. So we have the full 54 minutes, which is a radio show, an hour block radio show. But for podcasting, 54 minutes can be too long. So we had talked to a lot of people, like, how do we get more downloads for the podcast? How would we make this more attractive? And oftentimes the advice was, well, cut it up into shorter segments. So we interview 2 or 3 other people on our show, but we also put in segments. So we have a segment called Your New Business Journey that we can pull out separately. We have a segment called Secrets of the Entrepreneurial Mind that we can pull out separately. And then we have the different interviews. So to attract more listeners, we decided to break it up into smaller chunks and post those separately from the long 54-minute interview.
Okay. And just to be clear, I can see it in front of me because I got your podcast pulled up. For the listener who might not already have that, do you publish the full 54 minutes as well as these few clips each week?
We do. And we were putting the full 54 minutes on YouTube, but we're rethinking our YouTube strategy right now. Okay. YouTube, as you know, YouTube is extremely important for our podcast. Last statistic I saw was 68% of people are getting their podcasts from YouTube. So we're rethinking the strategy on that. And there are a lot of programs that help you do that. So I think one thing about podcasting, radio show not so much, but podcasting is it really helps you a lot if you love tech and you love playing with new software programs, because as you know, we end up using a lot of those, right?
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because they update and increase and come out with new things quite quickly. And so sometimes we take on one and maybe even the week after something better comes along. So it is something that could be, a part-time job, just to be like, what are the current tools that I could be using to make my life easier? So I think that's an interesting point, especially where we are with technology and artificial intelligence and things like that. So now you've put out lots and lots of episodes. I think we talked about it being a few hundred so far, plus all these bonus episodes. And what can you share from what you've learned, either the easy way or the hard way, to somebody who's less, not quite where you are? They haven't published nearly as much and they want it to be successful. Is there anything that comes to mind that you want to share with a newer podcaster?
Well, yes, I really want to share this. If you can keep your motivation up, do it. Keep doing it. I'll tell you what, Passage to Profit, we don't have a lot of listeners and downloads. I mean, we have a lot, but not as many as some people. But we've been doing it for 6.5 years. So we are one of the top 3% podcasts per Listen Notes. And we also got named one of the top 10 entrepreneur podcasts to be interviewed on by FeedSpot. And part of that is just the longevity of just doing it every week. So you don't have to do it every week. Every week is ideal. Do it every 2 weeks. But don't give up. Don't get discouraged. Keep doing it. And I think one thing that I think we need as podcasters to explain to listeners in general is the difference between downloading an episode and listening to an episode. People don't, right?
For sure.
Because people don't realize if you download it, you can listen to it anytime without the internet and you're not using data. But I think people just go listen, they don't download. And a lot of people really count is the downloads. The other thing, I've done tons of research into this. I know everybody wants to monetize, but you have to get the downloads to show that you can monetize, and maybe you want to get sponsors and they want to see that people are listening. If you have advertising dollars to spend, the very best place to spend them is on other podcasts. The reason being, you need to do social media, obviously, but if people are on social media, they're not necessarily going to come off social media to go listen to a podcast, right? If they're on another podcast, especially like if they're on a long road trip or something, and they hear an ad for a podcast that sounds interesting, you're more likely that they'll listen to it.
Yeah. I always say, Elizabeth, that 100% of the listeners of that podcast that you're advertising on listen to podcasts.
Yes.
And we don't know if we're on Facebook ads or Google ads or YouTube ads. We don't know what is the amount of people that listen to podcasts in this platform. I'm going to send letters to everybody's house. How many of those do we know listen to podcasts? We're not all the way sure. But if we put those dollars, like you said, to be featured on other people's shows, we already know that it's not swimming upstream for them to check you out.
Right. And I guess the other thing, so I host a meetup with Stacey Sherman. We co-host a meetup. And last night, she and I talked about the 10 steps you need to do to start a podcast. So this is really fresh in my mind. The other thing is you do have to make sure your audio is really good. I mean, I'm using expensive equipment because, this was for the radio during COVID. So we bought these like $400 or $500 microphones. You can get a good mic that plugs into your computer, but you need to test it. I've tested so many cheap mics and none of them sound good. There are some that are better. I don't know if you have a favorite mic that you use, Adam.
Yeah. The Shure SM7B, I think, is the one you are using. Is that right?
Yes.
Same one Michael Jackson recorded Thriller on. It's a phenomenal mic. And absolutely, we have a little resource. It's a PDF that we put together where it's just equipment that we've personally vetted. And just a side note, the microphone that everybody will find when you just type in what's a good podcast mic, it's called the Blue Yeti. It is definitely not on there. That's a condenser microphone, and it doesn't sound nearly as clear as what Elizabeth's using or what I'm using right now. It sounds very echoey. You can hear the room noise. You can hear the people walking by, the dogs barking, all of that stuff just comes right into that mic easily when you rustle in your chair or change position or posture. You will hear that. So to answer your question, Elizabeth, yes, there are 5 that we've recommended. The one you're using is the top one. It's the most expensive one that we recommend. It's about $500, like you said, $450. It just depends where you get it. And the bottom one is like $16. $16 is not the best mic, but it sounds way better than a $120 Blue Yeti. Way better. And then we also have a $69 Samsung Q2U that's on there. We have a $99 ATR 2100X that's on there. And then we have the $250 one that I'm using right now that's a Shure brand like yours. It's the Shure MV7. Those 5 podcast microphones are on that site. And we just feel so strongly that if you don't get one of those 5, you're going to spend more than you need and probably get less quality than you want. So that's a thing that I'm passionate about. I love that you brought up with, I think it was your 10 steps of launching a podcast that you did with, is it Stacy Sherman? Did I say the name right?
Yes.
Yeah, your meetup group. And I agree with you. Podcast mic, a decent mic is important. I think that's one of the foundations of making sure that you're not going to turn off a listener.
Right. And now those less expensive mics. So this Shure mic that I have has to go through a Rodecaster. Do some of the ones that you have on your list just plug into a USB port?
I love the question. So the cheapest one is USB only. The $20 one, it's like $16. The next 3, the one that's $69, $99, and $250, those 3 have the option of being USB only, or I shouldn't use the word only. They have the option of being USB directly into the computer, or you could use that bigger XLR cable that a lot of sound engineers want to use. And it can go through some type of interface, like a Rodecaster, like the one that you're using. Or it could be in a Scarlett, like a less expensive interface. But I know this is like a lot. If you use the one that Elizabeth uses, you want to be cautious and you want to do your research on if that device, like the Scarlett or the Rodecaster, does that device have a way to amplify the sound? Because on its own, that mic won't put out enough. And so people are using things called cloud lifters, which is on our website if you need one, and or using a Rodecaster, which I can vouch, it gives enough power. It'll do what you need. But yeah, 100%. Those other 3, they are versatile. The middle 3, you can do either way. The cheapest one is USB only, and the one that you use is XLR only. And so, yeah, if you buy the most expensive mic there, you are forced to also buy extra equipment on top of it to make it sound at its best. The middle 3 are kind of like, I can start by just plugging it directly into a laptop. And if and when I want to go the XLR way, I have the ability to add to it and not have to get a new mic.
Right. And I think it is important that we discuss this because if you have bad audio, nobody's going to listen.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe there's a couple people listening. So I can't say the quote, literally nobody, but I don't think that it's going to be anywhere near the amount, because when we listen to a podcast and we have 2 options of great podcasts in the same genre, both of them in the top 3% in the world, one of them doesn't have the quality that makes it easy on us to hear it when we're driving or working out or cooking, we'll probably go to the other one that sounds better. So the other one will probably grow a lot faster.
Right. And we're both wearing headphones. So that's something else that you need to do if you're talking to somebody, because the way the sound comes out of whatever speakers you're using, it bounces all around. So you really need to have it go through headphones.
Okay. Yeah, and we work with people starting podcasts a lot, and they'll come, and I think you do too, Elizabeth. You can answer that in a sec too. One thing that a lot of the times will happen, especially with women, is they don't want to have to wear headphones. They don't even want the mic to be in front of them. Oftentimes they're like, no, I'll put the mic way in behind me. I don't want it to ruin the visual
Right.
effect of my YouTube part, but they also not want to wear the headphones.
Mhm.
And I agree with you. I think we've done several podcast episodes on the difference between recording with or without headphones, and it actually does make a difference. People really
Mhm.
should be considering having them. So I'm glad you brought that up.
So those are my top tips.
Okay. So consistency being the number one most
Mhm.
important one. It's if you can keep going for a long time, and
Mhm.
you've been doing yours for 6.5 years, you've gotten to the top 3%. You don't have the most amount of listeners, but you have a good amount of listeners. And
Mhm.
it might not have happened if you just quit your podcast after trying it out for a few months. Secondly, if you have dollars to spend on ads, make sure you put that on other people's podcasts, because that's a great place to get in front of your listener. Third, make sure you have good audio quality with a microphone. And fourth, make sure you're using headphones. And I'll share a couple of reasons why. Elizabeth mentioned this. If she or I didn't have headphones, let's say I didn't have headphones on right now. When she would say something, it would come out of my computer's speakers, and then it would likely try to go back into my microphone that I'm trying to use. And so that will echo, that'll reverb. It's just one reason. Another reason is if I can hear my guest clear right to my ears, then I know if she's using her mic right. I know if she is even using the right mic. And it helps me to be able to understand, hey, is something need a fix here? And the third reason is, for me, I can hear myself. And if you're using a Rodecaster, Elizabeth probably can hear herself. And if she can hear the difference, am I too loud? Is she too quiet? Then we can fix that. You have control, you understand. I've even got it to the place before where I didn't even know I wasn't using my mic. I didn't know it wasn't turned on. Actually, this happened more than 3 times for sure. Recorded an entire episode and then was upset because I didn't have my equipment on. But if you can hear yourself, you know if your equipment's on. So good stuff. So again, let's see. Consistency, marketing dollars, microphone, headset. I am curious, in your experience, Elizabeth, you've started not just this one podcast that has hundreds of episodes published, but you've also got the other 2 podcasts, one about Jersey podcasts
Yeah.
and the other about the secret of the ghost world.
Right.
And I want to understand, with those in mind, why did you start 3 podcasts? Why are they about different things? What was going through your head when you decided to do that? Because maybe the listener's thinking, do I need to have 3 podcasts?
Well, I don't think anybody needs to have 3 podcasts. I love to talk. And so, but really the one about the cat. So with Passage to Profit, as I said, started as a radio show we were approached by an iHeart rep in New York that we knew and was made into a podcast. And I'll tell you, that's our favorite one because we interview some of the most amazing people I've ever met. It was smart, great people for that. And it's great networking for us. The Jersey podcast, I had this cat. I got this kitten and he was scratching all the fur off his face and he looked like an alien. It was horrible. I took him to the vet 28 times in 1 month and they could not figure out what was going on with this cat. So I decided to start a podcast to see if anybody listening had any ideas what I could do. So I was at a conference and this was like literally the next day I met this woman, Danielle Woolley, who I'd kind of known through some networking things. And I knew she was big with cat rescue. And I said, hey, what would you think about starting a cat podcast about weird cat health issues? And she jumped on it. And we interviewed a lot of people. And I have found out a lot of things about cat. I thought I knew everything about cats because I've had cats my whole life, but found out a lot of things about cats. And it was an opportunity for us to interview people that normally would not be interviewed on a podcast. I mean, Adam, you get business people, you get podcasters, they're in the media all the time. The reason I say this is that we had my sister-in-law who has cats come on the podcast. We did a video podcast like you and I are doing. 3 months later, she died unexpectedly. And the only video of her was our podcast. And so it was on YouTube. So they took that and used it at the funeral. So having a weird podcast that's just kind of your passion podcast, you can have anybody you want on it. They don't have to be as polished and, as successful at business as most people that are going on podcasts are today. So that was the cat. The ghost story one, I told my kids ghost stories the whole time they were growing up, and I just wanted to do something super creative. And I used that one, honestly, to play with new software. So I found out how to use CapCut because of that podcast. Canva, I've been using Canva for everything. I don't know how familiar your listeners are with these tools, but probably pretty familiar if they have a podcast. I used Canva to create images for it. So CapCut allows you to put images over the top. So I would do a video, but I would put CapCut images over the top. So Canva now has an AI function where you can get a unique image, although sometimes they look really weird. I got one that was kind of a mixture of a man and a dog face, and it was really freaky looking, but it's a ghost story. So, hey, so that's kind of my creative outlet. But I also use it for research because nobody else is in it with me. It's just mine. So it doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah. And any thoughts here on running more than one podcast and or considering updating or rebranding a podcast? Because I think you have some knowledge or experience, or at least you're thinking about one or two of those things.
Okay. So do you want to hear a big mistake I made?
Heck yes.
Heck yes, you do.
I almost said something else, but I didn't want to offend you, Elizabeth.
Well, first of all, I think if you're going to do multiple podcasts, or even if you're going to do one really well, if you can afford it, get an assistant. So we have an assistant that helps us with Passage to Profit. And Danielle Woolley and I share the work on the Jersey podcast. But what I did it's a ghost story is the flip side. I'm rebranding it to Secrets of the Ghost World. But what I did wrong with that, I had it on YouTube, and YouTube has this paid promotion tab. And so I promoted some of the episodes and I got subscribers. It was great. I don't know how they got those subscribers, but then after I ended the promotion, nobody else would subscribe or even listen to the podcast. So then I dug a little deeper, and what YouTube does is it offers your content up to your subscribers first when you release a new episode. And if your subscribers don't listen to it, then it buries it. It doesn't offer it up. So when you first start your channel, it will offer your content to everyone based on the algorithms and what it thinks your podcast is about, right? And this was a video podcast. After you get some subscribers, it goes to them first. And if they're not interested, then it just buries it. So I'm like, oh, I really messed up by paying for those subscribers, even though it was through YouTube advertising. So I'm rebranding and restarting it, and I'm going to make it better too.
Okay.
Well, I learned a valuable lesson there.
I want to bring that up. I'm going to write it down because, 1 sec, subscribers. I don't want to miss this because I think it's really interesting. The same thing, Elizabeth, happens on other platforms in a way. Just throw it first at Facebook. Facebook starts by putting your post in front of a small number of the people that already follow you. And if those small people, let's just say you have 2,000 friends on Facebook, they might put it in front of 20 as a test. Hey, here's Elizabeth's post. Are you interested? And they start engaging. Then Facebook will say, yes, this is going good. I'm going to put it in front of the other friends. So they put it in front of the rest of the 2,000. And if you still get a lot of feedback and traction and engagement, then Facebook is going to put it in front of people that don't even know you, unless you might have your things set a different way. And so it works like that. This is totally makes sense, although I had never heard it before, Elizabeth, that YouTube's doing that. You've got, let's just say 2,000 people subscribe to your channel. It sends it to some of them or all of them. They don't make a lot of engagement. They don't watch it. They don't stay watching it. Then YouTube might say, hey, we don't need to do that. So you're talking about you got extra followers or subscribers by advertising through YouTube. Those subscribers didn't necessarily know you from Adam. They just kind of fell upon it, subscribed, but because they didn't have a long-term relationship with you, they might not notice or think about the next time that you get content. And when that happens, there's some type of algorithm within YouTube that says, well, her 2,000 people aren't interested in this. And it might be more or less than 2,000. I don't know, but we'll just pretend it's 2,000 for a second. Hey, they don't seem like they're making any engagement. They're not watching it. They're not commenting on it. They're not liking it. So they're split testing you against other people, A/B tests, and they say, well, this one's not being as effective. This one is. We'll put the eyeballs on video number 2.
Exactly. And you can either buy subscribers or you can buy views. And I haven't tested it lately to see if views gives you the same effect. But I was really disappointed. One reason I paid for the subscribers was I wanted to see if anybody would even be interested in this topic and
Wait,
be interested.
Can I clarify something? Just real quick. When you paid for subscribers, does that mean you advertised and got legitimate followers, or does it mean that you paid a company that had random people go ahead and subscribe, even though they weren't maybe interested in because I think it matters to the end result, especially for the listener.
I agree. So no, this was actually a YouTube promotion. So it was through YouTube. So I don't know how familiar your listeners are with YouTube, but if you go into YouTube and you go onto your content page and it lists all the videos you've put in on your channel, along the top, and this was in beta when I was trying it, so I see it's still there. I don't know if everybody has this or not. It might depend on how many videos you have, whatever. There is a tab that says promotions. And if you click open that tab, it allows you to spend advertising dollars to promote your video. You can either try to get more views or more subscribers. So it's completely through Google. So I thought it was safe because I wasn't buying subscribers from a list, like you're saying.
Yeah, okay.
I was actually having Google show the content and getting subscribers, and I thought Google was showing it to people that would really like it and want to keep watching it. And that didn't happen. And when you look YouTube, Google owns YouTube, so I was mixed up at these days, and which are both owned by Alphabet, right? So YouTube gives you amazing statistics. I've done marketing in the past, so you can go find out a lot about how your podcast is doing on YouTube. Now, if you don't have that, there's other places where you can get statistics on your podcast outside of this. But in YouTube, you can get the statistics. And it showed where it was putting my show. And I was like, or where people were coming to my show from. And I was like, that doesn't even sound like it's that similar to what I'm doing. And I can't remember what they were right now. So I think that even though I thought I was being really specific, it was called Ghost Stories, the Flip Side. So I thought, ghost stories, that's pretty obvious what these are, right? It still didn't really work right, and I'm not sure why.
Got it. How about this? So do you plan to keep doing 3 podcasts in the long term, or doing 4, or doing 1 or 2? What does that look like?
Now, what I'm kind of thinking right now is a Passage to Profit we will keep doing for as long as we can totter into the studio, whether we need a cane or not. Jersey Podcasts, I do want to keep doing because it's pretty easy. The Ghost Stories one, I do want to keep doing, but that is really a time-consuming podcast to do.
Is it like the effort of coming up with the content that takes the most time, or is it recording it or verifying data? What do you think?
Okay, so what I did with this, and this is not something that most people do, okay? Just so you know, I would write the story myself, which doesn't really take me that much time. Some of these stories, as I said, I told my kids when they were younger, so they're right there. I do need to take a creative writing course if I'm going to keep doing this, though, because I'm not sure my writing's good enough. Then I would record it, which didn't take that much time. I practiced it a couple times. What took the time, and this is my own fault, is I would go into Canva, and I can spend hours in Canva and make pictures to go over the top of the audio so that it was almost like, almost like a movie. Although I didn't make videos, I just made pictures. And that is the most time consuming. Although I will say there's more and more software coming out that makes it easier and easier to do that. So I might put that one on the back shelf for a little bit and then wait until the software catches up to where I need it to be and then go back to doing that one.
Okay. That's cool. Are these stories, ghost stories that you made up and taught your kids? They aren't things that had happened and you're recounting them.
No. So I'll tell you how I got the idea.
Okay.
I wanted to do this ghost story podcast as a storytelling podcast. Scripted fiction is what they call it now, I think. And I started listening to other podcasts because I feel like if you're going to come up with a new podcast that you want to do and a concept, you need to listen to other podcasts in that genre before you even start yours. So I listened to a bunch of cat podcasts before I started the cat one. Anyway, and then you can see what's working and what's not. Anyways, these ghost stories were like kind of dumb. And so the flip side of the ghost story was I would have my ghost persona tell the story. And then I would have the ghosts that were active in the story come on and just like really snarkily talk about I wasn't trying to scare that little idiot, I was just trying to get to the other side of the room. It's not my fault the guy died of a heart attack or whatever, just be really, just kind of make it a comedy, ghost story comedy thing. Okay. It's a really good concept. People love the concept. I'm not sure that I execute as well as I could, but if I had all the money in the world, what I would do would be to hire actors, script writers and actors to help me with it. But
that would be fun. That would literally be so fun. Hey, let me ask you a question because you mentioned, earlier to get an assistant if you can afford it. And you're talking about now having money for the podcast. Let's think about the listener, a newer podcaster. You also mentioned if you've got marketing dollars, put that on other people's podcasts. Let's think about if we have a budget, but not an unlimited budget. If we've got a budget, where do you feel would be good places to put money, whether it's advertising on other people's shows, having an assistant to support you, or having better production for the editing and maybe actors and actresses?
It depends on how much you can do yourself, quite honestly. So for Jersey Podcasts, we did everything ourselves. We got a free account on Buzzsprout. So Buzzsprout and Spotify will give you free accounts. I suggest if you really are just starting out, don't pay. Libsyn, I did video podcasting on, and they charge for data. So you get so much data for so much money every month. And a lot of other places are going to video now, and YouTube is free. So I wouldn't do that again, probably. I would maybe just focus on YouTube if I really wanted to do something with video and then just put the audio on the other sites. But I think Spotify is getting video now and some of the other ones are. But I would get a free hosting service. And then one thing I do pay for with Buzzsprout that I really like is they have what they call Magic Remastering. And that takes the volume. So if you're interviewing somebody, so if Adam and I were speaking at very different volumes and you could hear him, but you couldn't hear me, it will master that so that it matches the volumes. So that makes you have to spend less money on editing. Editing we do on a Mac. So Danielle does all the editing on her Mac.
That's your assistant.
No, she's actually my co-host for Jersey Podcast.
The co-host. Okay.
So Jersey Podcasts is on a real shoestring. So she does all the editing on her Mac, and then I upload everything and I pull out a visual soundbite from Buzzsprout. So Buzzsprout's about $30 a month, and she bought Castmagic, which is a AI program. She paid a one-time fee and got a lifetime subscription, which takes your podcast and gives you descriptions and titles and everything else using AI, and gives you the transcript too. So we invested very little money. It's mostly our time. And then I use Canva. I have a paid Canva account because I use Canva for everything that I do. And I do the thumbnails. So really, if I had more...
Do you use templates for the thumbnails or do you create it from scratch every time?
I have found some templates I just love.
Okay.
So I do a combination. But the thing about Canva that people have used it, you can change everything in there. So you can get a template, you can change the colors, you can change the font, you can move things around. So templates, I think though the templates are a great place to start with
Okay.
Canva. So I have a paid Canva account. I don't even remember how much that is, maybe $35 a month. So if I had more money, I might pay for better editing, although I think Danielle's editing is pretty good. So assuming that all that is all good, then I would definitely take the money and pay to be advertising on other people's podcasts. But it just depends on how much you can do. Like editing is, I hate editing, to be honest with you. So if it were just me, I would pay to have somebody else do the editing. And then, but I really think money's best spent on marketing. I feel like personally, podcasting is 70% marketing. And
I love that.
I do. You can have the best content in the world, but if you get buried because you didn't put your keywords in your title, or you're not playing along with the algorithms the right way, or whatever, as we discussed earlier, you really need to get somebody who's good at marketing to help you with it. And I think you have to put marketing in before you start your podcast from day one. It starts with your title, and it starts with your concept too. You have to see if people want to hear this stuff. So I would put it in marketing if I could do everything else myself.
Awesome. I'm trying to think through with your journey, because you have things unique. You haven't done it the same way as everybody. You have 3 different types of podcasts. You focus weekly for sure on one of them. On the others, they're a little bit different. You're rebranding one of them. And I think it's interesting. You've got a lot of background and experience through this. You've shared a ton of value. And I'm trying, I got one. I was going to say, I'm trying to think of like a question that only you could answer. And I came up with one. And that is on co-hosts. Let's make this the last question of the episode.
Okay.
And have it on co-hosts. I'm going to share a tiny bit of background. For me, I started my very first podcast with 3 of us co-hosting, and it slowly went down to just me. The other 2 couldn't always take the time, the effort. It didn't always make sense. We didn't have the same schedules lining up because they were business partners. And the day that they officially finally told me, hey, I'm done, I think you can just run the podcast, I was relieved, because I'm like, that's going to make it so much easier. I don't have to stress. I don't have to think about this. I can ask the questions I want to ask. So I've got my own experience with co-hosts. And after the break, I want to ask you your experience, because you've got more than one podcast that both have co-hosts. One of them you're married to for 30 years. We'll be right back. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. We're back with Elizabeth Gearhart, and we've been talking about tons of great things, lots of little pieces of information that make a big difference. Talking about how she wanted to be consistent and how that's helping, and you should too. Talking about being on other people's podcasts or advertising on other podcasts. Talking about the microphone and the headphones to have the best audio quality so you don't lose listeners. Talking about putting money to getting an assistant. Talking about the difference between having a subscriber and not, and what the algorithms do. Additionally, talking about putting money toward other people's podcasts. And that advertising needs to start, as she said, before you ever launch your show. Buzzsprout and the magic remastering was another great takeaway. And also the paid version of Canva being a place where you can create the artwork for your podcast to allow you to market it easier and not have to pay someone else to create that stuff. and it can be done relatively quickly. Want to now switch this, Elizabeth, into pros and cons or lessons learned about doing a show with somebody else. Would you mind starting there?
Wow. It's a little bit of a touchy subject. So
Awesome.
when we started Passage to Profit with iHeart, my husband insisted his name come first and he be the master of the show. And since his law firm was paying for it, I was like, okay. So that's been kind of tough. And we've had many fights over, let me say something every once in a while. Like, I want to ask this guy a question, please. Like, I mean, you know what? There have been times he's really dominated and I've had to call him on the carpet for that. And I don't think I ever do that with him. It is nice to have a co-host. I mean, he has the creds because he's a patent attorney and it's a show for entrepreneurs. So they wanted me to do it with him, I guess, because it made it more interesting because, a patent attorney. They're notably introverts and I'm an extrovert. So anyway, but it has been tough. And then the show I do with Danielle Woolley, she was doing a lot of the work and she started dominating that too. And it was kind of tough for me. So I kind of pulled back on doing some work on that. I'm like, I don't really feel like this is my show. And now it's a little more even. But I think anytime you do a partnership, it's very difficult. The pros are if you really have something scheduled and you get in a car wreck or something, the other person can fill in for you. So that is a pro. And sometimes you're stumped with a guest, like what can you ask them? And the other person can fill in and ask you that. The cons are, everybody wants to be the big cheese, I think, and everybody wants to do the most talking and scheduling, like you said. So for Passage to Profit, we have studio time in New York City, so we have to meet that schedule, right? So that is set in stone. And there have been times my husband has missed it, and I've had to go do it, and I've had another co-host from iHeart fill in for him because I don't really want to do it. I could do it alone, but it's easy. Just the show format is two co-hosts. Jersey Podcasts has been really hard to schedule because we tried to set a set time, but Danielle has a lot of things going on. But I feel like it's too important to not do it. So that has limited the number of guests we can have. So a lot of times it's just her and me talking because we don't have a scheduled time for that. And I'm kind of like this organizer plan. It drives me insane. It's just not the way I like to run things. But unless I was going to sit there and talk about cats myself, which I think could get boring kind of fast. I mean, I would need to get the guests and do all that. And you can do that pretty easily with Podmatch. That's how we found each other, right?
Yeah.
So it's not impossible, but she knows a lot of people that she was so excited at the beginning and wanted to bring guests on. So that made that part of it easier. Would I do a podcast that wasn't storytelling by myself? I think I could at this point because I've had a lot of practice. I don't think I would have started it that way though.
Yeah. Well, so if there's somebody listening and they're thinking, she makes some great points, Elizabeth does, about the benefits. There are some drawbacks, some things to be thoughtful about, but she makes some good points like it makes it easier to ask guest questions, or it allows you to ensure that there is a dynamic that's fun and interesting. And any other thing that we're thinking, oh, if I did it on my own, I would have to do this other work, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You've mentioned some really good things about the pros, and to be clear on the cons, I feel like one of the things is at some point, maybe one of the two or three co-hosts is going to feel this person's dominating the conversation. I can't get a word in edgewise, or why am I even on the show if it's all about that person? Or in other words, flip it. Hey, I'm controlling the show. I'm using the show. And I didn't even know that I was potentially damaging a relationship with somebody I care about by just trying to have a good show. And
Right.
I thought that they could speak, but they just didn't necessarily speak. It was already flowing. And I didn't even know what I did wrong almost. So
Yeah.
interesting to see that on both sides. And I bet you anything, the reason those two jumped out might have been because I was the dominating I'm going to, I don't know that 100%, but I could certainly see that now that you've mentioned that.
Yeah. There's one other thing too, is sometimes you got to know which direction you want to take it. So, I mean, we're struggling with that with Passage to Profit. Richard thinks it should be more business. I feel like it should be innovation, and trying to define what the core message is of the show. We both have different ideas, and we haven't been able to figure out how to mesh those really. I mean, maybe business innovation is it. I don't know, but that's a hard one too. And I will say, right now I'm running a meetup with Stacy Sherman for podcast and YouTube creators community, and we're doing it for different reasons. And we're running into some issues because our reasons for doing this meetup are not the same. And that could be the same thing with a podcast too.
Yeah. That there really rings a bell to me from clients that I've worked with that have had co-hosts with them. The thought of, you're starting it because you want to achieve X. They're starting it because they want to achieve Y. And sometimes X and Y are challenging to fit together. So it's super, super interesting. And that'll stay with me now for the rest of my coaching on that. You mentioned your own podcast with your husband, the one that's also a radio show. And you mentioned that one of you thinks it should be about business. The other thinks it should be about innovation. And I'm going to place my opinion where it wasn't even asked for. And you said it could be business innovation. I'm just going to throw in a 2 cents real fast. I think it could be business and innovation. And I see exactly your husband's point about it being about business. And I also could see on that podcast, you talked a lot more about innovation and things that are changing. And it also could potentially help him get more clients that are doing that type of thing. So if I'm allowed to throw out an opinion, business and innovation, where you both bring it together, and it also ends up hopefully making more likely, slightly more likely, which is good enough, that he pulls in more clients for the patent stuff.
Well, thank you. I value that feedback. You know, we are always looking for feedback on how we can do the show better, but I'm going to tell him that. This is recorded, right? I'm going to have him listen to it.
Yeah, he can, he's going to be like, this Adam Adams guy, he doesn't know me. I love it. Elizabeth, I appreciate we've summed up a lot of the amazing things that you've shared with the listener, and grateful for it. To that same listener, hey, the next episode is likely to be a solo episode where I put together something just for you that I know you need in order to be a better podcaster. So don't go anywhere. I will see you on the next episode.
By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.